Be me, 34 years old, working as a regional manager for a logistics company, sitting at my desk during lunch break scrolling through social media like usual. Keep seeing this hashtag everywhere. Women my age and younger posting these videos. They're all saying the same thing. We don't need men. Men are obsolete. Choose yourself, queen. Millions of views on some of these comment sections going absolutely insane. Watch maybe 20 of them in a row because the algorithm knows I'll engage. Women talking about how they're never dating again, how they don't need partnership, how they're complete alone. Feel this weird knot forming in my stomach. Not anger exactly, more like recognition mixed with something close to grief. Because I remember being exactly there, saying exactly those things. Spent nearly a decade of my life, from age 22 to about 31, believing this stuff with my whole chest, was at every march in my city, volunteered with 3 different organizations, spent my weekends at planning meetings, genuinely believed I was part of something important, something that would liberate women from oppressive structures. The ideology felt like truth, like I'd finally understood how the world really worked. Men were the problem. Masculinity was toxic. Traditional relationships were traps designed to subjugate us. Said these things out loud at dinner parties, believed them when I was alone at night, organized workshops about economic independence, shared articles about the marriage penalty, posted constantly about how women needed to stop centering men. My entire framework for understanding relationships was built on suspicion and opposition. Dated during those years, but every relationship was basically me testing him, waiting for him to reveal his socialization, waiting for the moment he'd try to control me or limit me or show his true patriarchal colors. One guy I dated for 8 months. He was gentle and kind, worked as a nurse. He'd try to do nice things and I'd interrogate his motives. He'd offer to help with something and I'd snap about not needing to be rescued. He'd express an opinion that differed from mine and I'd see it as him trying to dominate the conversation. Eventually he told me he felt like I was constantly braced for him to hurt me, like I'd already decided he was guilty. I told him he was centering his feelings and making my legitimate concerns about power dynamics into something about his emotions. He left, obviously. This happened in variations, maybe 4 or 5 times. Never saw it as a pattern. Always saw it as me having standards and not settling. My friends during those years were all women who reinforced these exact beliefs. We'd get together and talk about how we were complete without men, how we were focusing on ourselves. Anyone who got into a serious relationship was kind of quietly pitied, like she'd failed some test the rest of us were passing. I remember one friend got engaged, and the way we all congratulated her had this weird hollow quality, like we were being supportive but also kind of mourning her loss of independence. She ended up not inviting most of us to the wedding. At the time I thought she'd been absorbed into couple culture and couldn't handle our radical presence. Looking back, she probably just didn't want people at her wedding who couldn't be genuinely happy for her. My mom used to try to talk to me during those years, very gently. She'd been married to my dad for 38 years. She'd say things like, "Partnership can be beautiful, like you don't have to do everything alone." I'd feel this surge of something like pity mixed with frustration. I thought she'd internalized her oppression, that she couldn't see how she'd been limited by her choices. Was so certain I understood her life better than she did. So certain that my framework was truth and her lived experience was false consciousness. The certainty was the thing. That's what I remember most. Being so completely sure that I had understood something most people were too conditioned to see. It made me feel intelligent, awake, like I was living deliberately while others sleepwalked. My work life was fine during all this. I was good at my job, moved up steadily, but my personal life was increasingly just me alone in my apartment, posting online, reading articles that confirmed what I already thought. Started noticing around age 29 that I was tired a lot. Not physically, something else. Tired of being vigilant, tired of analyzing every interaction for power dynamics. Tired of the way every conversation with the women in my circles felt like a performance of who could be the most radically independent. One of my colleagues at work, older woman named Patricia, maybe 55. She'd been divorced, raised 2 kids alone, then remarried in her late 40s. She'd sometimes mention her husband just in passing, normal stuff. Like he'd made dinner the night before, or they were planning a trip, or he'd said something funny. The way she talked about him was so easy, so free of the framework I was carrying. She clearly hadn't lost herself. She ran our entire division, made more money than him. But she also just enjoyed his company, appreciated partnership, didn't see it as a threat to her selfhood. I found myself seeking out her company more, just listening to how she talked about her life. Nothing she said was revolutionary. That was the thing. It was all very ordinary. But the ordinariness started to appeal to me in a way I couldn't quite articulate. Around this time, my dad had a health scare. Nothing ultimately serious, but scary in the moment. Had to go home for a week to help my mom. Watched the way she moved through that crisis. She was competent, made all the medical decisions, managed everything, but my dad's presence clearly mattered to her. Not because she couldn't function without him, because she didn't want to. Because going through hard things with someone you love is different than going through them alone. Saw her holding his hand in the hospital and felt something crack in my chest. It wasn't weakness, what I was seeing. It was connection, and it was sustaining her. Came back home and my apartment felt different. All my books about radical independence, all my art prints with empowering slogans, the group chat with my activist friends where we constantly reinforced each other's certainty. It all felt suddenly like a cage I'd built with my own hands. Started pulling back from the organizations, missed a few meetings, and people noticed, started getting check-in messages, asking if I was okay. But the messages had this undertone of suspicion, like I was betraying something. One woman I'd worked closely with asked if I'd started dating someone, said it in a way that made it clear that would be a problem, that would mean I'd been compromised. Started thinking about all the relationships I'd destroyed or prevented, all the times I'd interpreted kindness as manipulation, all the walls I'd built and called them boundaries, all the isolation I'd cultivated and called it independence. The guy who'd been a nurse, I thought about him a lot. How he'd volunteer at a free clinic, how he'd talk about his patients with genuine compassion, how he'd once cried watching a movie, and I'd felt contempt. Actually felt contempt for a man showing emotion, even though I'd have said I wanted men to be more emotionally available. Realized I hadn't wanted emotional availability. I'd wanted confirmation of my framework. Wanted men to acknowledge their collective guilt, to center my experience, to essentially agree they were the problem, didn't actually want partnership, wanted a kind of eternal apology. This all sounds so clear now, but at the time it was incredibly confusing. Felt like I was losing my identity. Feminism had been my whole framework for understanding myself in the world. Without it, I didn't know who I was supposed to be. Spent about 6 months in this weird liminal space. Still had all my activist friends, but felt increasingly alienated from them. Started declining invitations, let the group chats go unread. They eventually stopped reaching out, which hurt but also felt inevitable. We'd never been friends in the way I understood friendship now. We'd been ideological allies, which is a completely different thing. Started therapy during this time, had to try 3 different therapists. First 2 wanted to explore my internalized misogyny. Third one, a woman in her 60s, just listened. Let me talk through what I was feeling without trying to fit it into a predetermined framework. She asked me once what I actually wanted from my life. Not what I should want, not what was politically correct to want, what I actually wanted. Had no idea how to answer. Realized I'd spent a decade performing a version of wanting that I thought was righteous. Had no idea what was underneath that. Started small, paid attention to what made me feel good versus what made me feel correct. Reading fiction again instead of just political theory. Going to yoga classes and not analyzing the instructor's use of namaste as cultural appropriation. Having a glass of wine and watching reality TV without critiquing the gender dynamics. Letting things be simple sometimes. Letting myself be simple sometimes. Met someone in this period. A guy who worked in IT for a company we contracted with. We'd email about work stuff and he was funny in this low-key way. Eventually we got coffee, just as a casual thing. My whole body was braced for red flags. But he was just easy to talk to. Didn't try to impress me. Didn't perform sensitivity. Didn't seem to be operating from a script. Told me about his weekend helping his sister move. Complained about traffic. Asked about my work in a way that seemed genuinely interested. We started seeing each other, very slowly. I told him early on that I was figuring some stuff out, that I might be weird about things. He said okay and didn't press. The relationship was nothing like my previous ones. I kept waiting for the need to test him, to prove something. But he was so consistently just himself that there was nothing to test. He had opinions I disagreed with. We'd discuss them like adults. He had moments of being inconsiderate. I'd mention it. He'd adjust. I had moments of being prickly or withdrawn. He'd give me space. I'd come back. It was all so much more boring than my previous relationships. Boring in the best possible way. Started understanding that I'd been addicted to a kind of relationship drama. The testing, the finding of evidence, the vindication when men revealed their socialization. It had made me feel right, feel superior. But it had also kept me perpetually alone and perpetually at war. This new thing was quiet. We'd cook dinner together, watch movies, talk about our days. He'd sometimes do things for me not because he thought I couldn't do them, but because he wanted to. I'd let him because I was learning that accepting care wasn't weakness. I started noticing how different my nervous system felt. I was calmer, slept better, stopped having that constant background hum of vigilance and analysis. My work performance actually improved because I wasn't spending half my mental energy on ideological processing. Some of my old friends saw me with him on social media. Got a few messages that were ostensibly happy for me but had undertones. One asked if he was doing the work. Another said she hoped I wasn't losing myself. Realized they saw my happiness as suspicious, saw partnership itself as suspect. Didn't respond to most of those messages. The friendships just kind of faded, which was sad but also felt necessary. Started building new friendships, mostly through work and random life stuff. People who had varied lives, varied politics, who didn't require ideological purity, women in partnerships, women single by choice, women who'd been married for decades, men who were kind, men who were thoughtful, men who were just regular people doing their best. The diversity of human experience started seeming beautiful instead of threatening. So now, sitting here watching these videos, seeing millions of young women declaring they don't need men, I recognize the voice, the certainty, the performance of it. See my younger self in every single one. The way they're trying to convince themselves as much as their audience. The way independence has become an identity instead of just a circumstance. The way they're mistaking isolation for empowerment. And I want to say something, even though I know it'll be unpopular, even though I'll get accused of betraying women or whatever. Because I spent a decade of my life in that framework, and it didn't liberate me. It made me smaller, angrier, more afraid. Take out my phone and open Instagram. Film myself in my car, still on lunch break, no special lighting or editing, just me, looking tired and ordinary. Start talking about what I'm seeing. Explain I used to be deeply involved in this stuff, spent years organizing and believing. Explain how that framework damaged my ability to connect with people. How it made me interpret every interaction through suspicion. How it kept me isolated while telling me isolation was freedom. Talk about how partnership isn't about needing someone in a desperate way. It's about choosing to build something with another person. How interdependence isn't weakness. It's actually how humans are designed to thrive. How men aren't a monolith, they're individuals, and treating them as the enemy creates exactly the polarization we claim to oppose. How you can be fully yourself, fully capable, fully independent, and still value partnership. These things aren't contradictory. Talk about how the trend feels performative in a way that worries me. Like young women are trying on an identity that will cost them years of their lives, years they could spend actually connecting with people, building real relationships. Instead of performing independence for an algorithm, say, I'm not judging anyone's choice to be single, that's completely valid. But there's a difference between choosing to be single and building your identity around not needing men. One is a choice, the other is a reaction. One is freedom, the other is still letting men define you, just in opposition. Finish by saying, I'm probably going to get destroyed in the comments, and that's fine. But if even one woman sees this, and it makes her question whether the framework is serving her, it's worth it. Post it without overthinking. Put my phone away and go back to work. Try not to check it for the rest of the afternoon, but obviously fail. By the time I'm driving home, the video has a few thousand views. Comments are exactly what I expected. Lots of women my age and older saying thank you, saying they had similar experiences. Lots of younger women calling me a pick-me, saying I've betrayed feminism. Someone says, I'm clearly just desperate for male validation. When someone else says, I'm promoting toxic relationship dynamics. Few people call me a trad wife, even though I make more money than my partner, and we split everything equally. The labels are predictable. The framework is predictable. But there are also comments from women saying they've been feeling the same way, feeling exhausted by the constant performance of not needing anyone, feeling like they can't admit they want partnership without being seen as weak. One woman writes that she's been in the activist space for 5 years and is so tired she can barely function. Another says she pushed away someone she cared about because her friends told her wanting a relationship was internalized misogyny. These comments sit in my chest, heavy and familiar. Spend the evening responding to some of them, just having actual conversations. My partner comes home, asks about my day, and tell him about the video, show him some of the responses. He reads for a while, then says, it's interesting how the criticism all assumes you're doing this for men. Like they can't imagine you changed your mind based on your own experience and reasoning. Exactly, I say. That's the framework. Women who disagree must be brainwashed or desperate. Can't be that we actually thought about it and came to different conclusions. He makes dinner while I keep scrolling through comments. This moment right here, him cooking while I'm on my phone. 10 years ago, I would have analyzed this for gender dynamics. Would have felt guilty for not helping, or would have insisted on doing it all myself to prove something. Now it's just Tuesday. He feels like cooking. Tomorrow I probably will. It's easy and equal and not a statement about anything. Over the next few days, the video keeps spreading, gets reposted to Twitter where it becomes a whole thing. Mostly people being angry at me, saying I'm setting women back, but also a lot of women, especially in my age range, sharing their own stories. Women who spent their 20s in the same framework and eventually found it limiting. Women who'd been told wanting partnership was weakness. Women who'd damaged relationships with good people because the ideology required it. Start getting DMs from women asking how I changed, what the process was like. Try to respond honestly. Say there was no single moment. Just a slow accumulation of noticing the gap between what I said I believed and what actually made me feel whole. One woman in her late 20s writes that she's been trying to force herself to be okay alone. But she's not. She's lonely, and she feels like admitting that makes her a bad feminist. Tell her that loneliness is a normal human emotion. We're social animals. We're built for connection. There's nothing empowering about denying that. She writes back later, saying she cried reading that, like she'd been given permission to be human. These conversations are the thing that makes the criticism worth it. The video eventually runs its course in the algorithm, gets replaced by newer content. But I keep thinking about all those young women posting about not needing men, performing certainty for millions of viewers. Wonder how many of them actually believe it versus how many are trying to convince themselves. Wonder how many will spend years in that framework before finding their way out. I wonder if some of them will see my video years from now and recognize themselves and talk to my therapist about all of it. She asks what I hope comes from sharing my experience. Say, I guess I just want women to know there are other ways that you can care about equality and rights and autonomy and value partnership. That rejecting traditional limitations doesn't mean rejecting connection itself. That we can be whole people who also enjoy companionship. These things aren't contradictory even though the framework treats them as such. She nods, asks if I'm at peace with the criticism. Think about it. Realize I mostly am, because I'm not performing anymore. Not trying to be the right kind of woman for an ideology. Just being myself, which includes contradictions and changes and growth. The criticism comes from the same place I used to operate from. The certainty, the framework, the need to police other women's choices. I understand it because I was it, but I'm not anymore. A few weeks later, I'm at a work thing, talking to a younger colleague. She's maybe 25. Mentions she saw my video. Brace myself for criticism, but she says it actually really helped her. Says she's been feeling pressure from her friend group to break up with her boyfriend. Not because he's done anything wrong, but because being in a relationship is seen as settling. choosing the patriarchy, choosing limitation, but she loves him and doesn't want to end it. My video made her realize she doesn't have to. Tell her I'm glad. Ask how she's handling the friend group pressure. She says she's starting to create some distance from those friendships, recognizing they're built on ideology rather than genuine care. Feel proud of her for figuring this out at 25 instead of 31. The time I lost to that framework, I can't get it back. The relationships I damaged, most of them can't be repaired. The years I spent isolated and calling it empowerment, they're gone. But I'm only 34, that's what I tell myself. Have time to build something real now. Time to have actual partnerships based on mutual care rather than suspicion. Time to be a whole person instead of a political statement. My partner and I talk sometimes about maybe getting married eventually. Not because we need to, not because of tradition, just because we want to. Because we like building a life together. Because partnership has made both of us better, fuller versions of ourselves. 10 years ago, I would have seen that as weakness or delusion. Now I see it as just human. The viral trend keeps going. New videos every day. Women declaring independence, celebrating not needing men, getting millions of views, thousands of supportive comments. Part of me wants to make another video, say more. But I realize that's ego, wanting to be right, wanting to convince, the same impulse that drove me when I was deep in activism. Instead, I just live my life. Go to work, come home, have dinner with my partner, call my mom, visit my dad, maintain my friendships, exist as a regular person with a regular life. Sometimes I'll see a comment on my old video from someone newly discovering it, thanking me for saying what they'd been feeling. Those still mean something, and still make me feel like the criticism was worth it. Because if the ideology had kept going unchallenged in my life, I'd still be alone, still be performing certainty while feeling increasingly empty, still be mistaking isolation for empowerment, still be at war with half of humanity. And that's not freedom. That's just another kind of cage. Sitting here now, lunch, break, scrolling through the same trend that started this, feel grateful I'm on the other side of it. Grateful I questioned, changed, grew. Grateful for the boring, quiet, unglamorous partnership I have. Grateful to be wrong about something I was so certain about. Because certainty is seductive, but it's also limiting. And I'd rather be uncertain and connected than certain and alone. Close the app, finish my lunch, get back to work. Just another Tuesday. Just another regular person living a regular life. And it's enough. It's more than enough. It's everything I was looking for while I was busy performing, not needing it.